Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
If subsistence hunting, trapping, and fishing are important to you, please consider applying for one of the open seats on your Federal Subsistence Regional Advisory Council. These seats will be filled by rural Alaskans who are knowledgeable about fish and wildlife subsistence in their region. Apply by Friday, January 29th, 2016. Information at 1-800-478-1456 or email subsistence@fws.gov.
The National Weather Service.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us here for Tuesday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy. Well, another big storm rolling up toward Alaska, and there are high wind warnings out for the upper hillside Turnagain Arm area, and Turnagain Arm on up toward Palmer. And the upper hillside Turnagain Arm could see winds gusting over 100 miles per hour after midnight tonight until about 11 a.m. tomorrow. Lower hillside go about 70 miles an hour, and the rest of Anchorage Bowl, 45, maybe 50 miles an hour on those wind gusts. And moving along, also have high wind warnings out for tonight until about noon tomorrow, noon Wednesday, for Bristol Bay for southeast winds 80 to 100 miles an hour, and got a blizzard warning out for St. Lawrence Island, the Bering Strait coast, and that's until 6 p.m. tomorrow, and another 3 to 5 inches of snow, northeast winds 55 miles an hour. That'll create visibilities, reduce visibilities to a quarter mile or less at times through tonight through tomorrow. We've got high wind warnings out for the Yukon Delta and the eastern Norton Sound areas for tonight and until 9 p.m. tomorrow night there, with looking at 30 to 60 mile per hour winds in this area. And then winter weather advisories are out until 6 p.m. Wednesday for the lower Yukon up into the Koyukuk, or the from Galena on down toward Grayling, and that's for snow and blowing snow. Again, several inches of snow, anywhere from, it was 4 to maybe 6 inches additional accumulation in those areas. And then high wind warnings here for the Alaska Range through tomorrow, looking for winds later tonight, or actually continuing here, anywhere from 60 to 100 miles an hour in gusts. The strongest winds will be from the central Alaska Range back into the northern Kuskokwim Valley areas. And that about covers it all for the warnings and advisories. I forgot to mention there's a blizzard watch out for Thompson Pass for tomorrow for blizzard conditions possibly developing there. Yesterday we had a band of clouds lifting northward and trying to slide into the southeast coast here, with the main flow up to the north, and you can see the Alaska Range here ripping some holes in the cloud cover there. And then another system here over Bristol Bay, some more clouds in the low pressure area there, southwest in Nikolsky. And again, that kind of tracking east and then making a turn to the north here, and we'll see today that centers up right over the Pribilofs to start with, lifting back to the northeast there. And so that flow on the west side of that, southeast winds keeping it mild with the rain and snow. Here, most of the precipitation back to the west and northwest today, on up into the central interior in the Koyukuk Valley. Drier conditions developed along the North Gulf Coast. Still some showers around in that area there. Nice day over the Panhandle, and not too bad, just a lot of thick cirrus spreading over the eastern interior. And looking at this again, big fetch of moisture south to north here, and actually more clouds gathering with that next storm down to the south. Still off the map here at 1 p.m. this afternoon. On the chart, there's that next system down there, 964 millibars. Southeast winds in advance of that, kind of pushing all the moisture back along the Alaska Range into Bristol Bay and back up to the north. Areas of snow all the way up in toward Norton Sound. back to the northwest across the Koyukuk Valley, where they picked up about 4 to 6 inches of new snow in the last 24 hours. And then a band of snow with that front extends back across the Noatak Valley to the northwest coast, with Kivalina, Point Hope, Cape Lisburne reporting snow today, and that wrapping back down through the Bering Strait. Strong north winds through the strait today, temperatures of single numbers, and that coming down across St. Lawrence Island. Otherwise, down to the south, rain and snow showers over the Pribilof Islands and the Aleutians. Some colder air dropping southward back to the west there, bringing some snow showers in toward Shimia. A few scattered showers up over the northern southeast coast. Otherwise, the remainder of the area there just cloudy with increasing sun down over the southern locations. And tonight, this system tracks northward right up into Bristol Bay by about 3 a.m. tonight. Should be in Bristol Bay there. So got hurricane force wind warnings out for tonight for the Barren Islands up into Kamishak Bay for winds of 65 to 70 knots. High wind warnings again, as I mentioned, for Bristol Bay, and very strong winds along the western Alaska range. Gales and storm force winds, or actually storm force winds developing from the North Gulf Coast, and also pushing up into Prince William Sound. Good shot of rain coming in with this system as well. Rain heavy at times, western Prince William Sound, southern Kenai Peninsula, right back down across Kodiak Island. And rain, occasional rain across Bristol Bay. More of a snow condition up here to the north. Of course, the blizzard warning tonight for the Bering Strait coast and the St. Lawrence Island areas. Very windy across the Alaska range, but dry up over the eastern and northeast interior areas. A band of snow lifting northward across the Brooks Range, maybe reaching the eastern Arctic coastal areas there, but lighter winds and more scattered on the rain and snow showers out over the Aleutians. High pressure over British Columbia, keeping the panhandle basically dry, but some moisture may slip into the northern areas, but nothing that'll amount to very much at all. And then for tomorrow, that low continues northward, so the winds, the strongest winds will lift northward, and again the front pushing eastward, so winds will be diminishing throughout the afternoon across south central Alaska, with the heaviest rain also pushing eastward now from about just east of Yakutat into, or just east of Cordova in toward Yakutat and Elfin Cove. Looks wet all the way down to Port Alexander, and then it could see some sunshine again for Stewart, Hyder, and maybe Annette as well. But a couple of troughs here south to north flow, this moisture coming northwestward, and it'll keep it wet along the Alaska Peninsula, maybe Kodiak Island, and then rain and snow along the Alaska Range. Kuskokwim Valley looks pretty good, but very windy conditions all through this area up across Seward Peninsula. Blizzard conditions still going from the Bering Strait coast down across St. Lawrence Island. Snow and blowing snow lifting northward into the Noatak Valley, especially on the western Arctic coast there. A lot of showers here coming into the eastern Aleutians, but again, the south to north flow keeping conditions very mild, with most of the precipitation in the form of rain kind of mixed out here along the west coast there, and then either the far western Aleutians or the Bering Strait area, St. Lawrence Island up to the north, about the only places that'll be seeing much in the way of snow. And then for Thursday, this low kind of slowly backs to the west, continues to weaken, fills about 20 millibars to about 977 there for a value. Another system down here west of the Pribilofs, about 975. But you can see a lot less packing of the gradient here, so winds will be much lighter along the west coast areas all the way up into the Chukchi Sea. Then we've got another system kind of forms on a frontal band tomorrow night and lifts northward to maybe this position Thursday afternoon, so that'll bring more wind and rain heavy at times, especially for the central and eastern North Gulf Coast. Looks like gale force winds definitely along the coast here, the outer coastline of the Panhandle, with small craft advisories over the inland areas, but rain spreading over the entire Panhandle during the day on Thursday. Pretty good break here with some higher pressure there coming in across Kodiak Island, that ahead of the next system that's down to the south. And kind of damp, but not too bad for the Alaska Peninsula. Lots of rain and snow showers, as I mentioned, out over the eastern Bering Sea. Otherwise, the interior for Thursday, not looking too bad. A lot less on the winds and some variable clouds with scattered areas of widely scattered snow showers. Temperatures across the southeast coast this afternoon, there's a 44-degree reading at Sitka. Otherwise, Juneau and Annette had 35, 39 at Klawock, about the same in Yakutat. Cordova 40, but Valdez just 34, 47 in Anchorage and Palmer. Birchwood was a warm spot with 52 degrees this afternoon, 43 in Homer, just 35 in Kenai. Lower 40s are Kodiak Island, upper 30s is Susitna Valley and Copper River Basin. -6 at Northway, but breeze blowing at Delta with 27 and back down to 17 at Fairbanks. Some pretty good snow fell in Tanana earlier today at 19, 24 at up at Bettles, below zero Fort Yukon, Arctic Village, and of course a lot farther below zero up along the Arctic coast, and then back into the teens and 20s here over the northwest interior, 20s to mid-30s for Norton Sound and the Yukon Delta coast, with 40s Sparivon, Iliamna, and Sleepmute, all in the lower 40s, otherwise lower to mid-30s for the southwest coast. And out in the Aleutians, upper 30s, but dropping down toward freezing over around Shimia, and 46 at King Salmon, and 30s to near 40 for the Alaska Peninsula. Lows tonight under mild southerly flow, 30s to lower 40s here over the southwest interior, with mild upper 20s all the way up into the the Kobuk Valley, teens in the Koyukuk Valley, a little below zero here over the eastern interior areas, but many areas south central Alaska staying above freezing again, as well as much of the Panhandle, mostly in the 30s. Highs for tomorrow, mid-40s over the southwest and south central part of the state, and near 40 over the southeast coast, with upper 30s to lower 40s for the Alaska Peninsula, mid to upper 30s for the Aleutians, and maybe Barrow, the only spot staying below zero at -1, the forecast high, but look at them, very mild conditions northward all the way to the southern slopes of the western Brooks Range. And moving on to flying weather with that front edging eastward toward the southeast coast. Areas IFR from about Cordova eastward into Elfin Cove, and then northward to Chilkoot and White Pass. VFR through Cook Inlet and the Susitna Valley down to the Kenai Peninsula. VFR also Kodiak Island into Bristol Bay. IFR along the Alaska Range, another swath from the Yukon Delta northeastward there to the northern Koyukuk Valley. IFR across most of the northern Bering Sea, marginal conditions down to the south, improving. Some areas of VFR showing up over the Aleutians. For the passes individually, Anatuvik VFR becoming marginal as moisture lifts northward. Same forecast for Adigan. Lake Clark and Merrill, IFR in the eastern entrances. In across the Kuskokwim Valley, conditions will be VFR. Same forecast for Rainy. VFR in the western entrance. Otherwise, IFR, lowest conditions, eastern approach. And for Windy, again, south entrance, IFR, VFR in the north side. Isabel, VFR in the north entrance. Otherwise, looking IFR for that pass. Mentesta, VFR. Could see some marginal VFR in the southern entrance. And then for Tanita, VFR here on the western side, marginal VFR for the eastern entrance. And Portage just looks IFR. Chilkoot and White, marginal becoming IFR. And the freezing levels here, one surge of warm air lifting northward late tonight, early tomorrow morning, 2,000 feet over the, or actually I got that reversed, 6,000 feet over the eastern interior. And then another surge coming northward of that next system in toward the North Gulf Coast. Icing below about 12,000 feet. Could see some occasional widespread moderate rime here along the eastern Gulf Coast. And then this area will be lifting northward into the Susitna Valley back to the Alaska Range tomorrow. And then some more icing coming northwestward with another surge of moisture approaching the Alaska Peninsula. And the jet stream well to the south, strong jet across the Pacific, takes a turn to the north here right around the longitude of Kodiak Island, about 120 knots there, up and over the top, ridging here over the eastern interior and right along the Panhandle for 9,000 feet, 60 to 75 knot winds as this low center pulls northward. The stronger winds will be following it along, right along the west coast, in over the Kuskokwim Valley areas, back across the Seward Peninsula. Lighter winds over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians, and then ahead of that front, we've got 45 to 55 knot winds right up into the eastern Gulf Coast. 3,000 feet, again, along in advance of that front, 40 to 50 knot winds out of the southeast there along the Panhandle, lighter inland, and 35 to 45 knots up into the central interior, and 45 to 60 knots or better here across the western interior, right up to the Seward Peninsula areas. Northeasterlies coming back around, but not too strong here over the Aleutians, is 20 to 25 knots, with the Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay about 45 knots. And as far as turbulence goes, possible severe here from Togiak Bay across the Kuskokwim-Yukon Delta northward, all the way up into the Noatak Valley and about Cape Lisbourne and across the Chukchi Sea in the Bering Strait, mostly below about 5,000 feet, especially for small aircraft. Otherwise, moderate chop here for the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, right along the Alaska Range. And then ahead of the front, look for some moderate chop here below about 8,000 feet right along the southeast coast up to Yakutat in the northern panhandle. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
Alaska, the Great Land. Wild. Rugged. And inaccessible. This remoteness is a great challenge for Forest Service employees who oversee the management of this untamed land. It is the helicopter that is providing access to many remote locations, enabling the Forest Service to accomplish a wide variety of projects that otherwise would be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to perform. Helicopters are used for a variety of jobs. Personnel transportation, movement of cargo and project materials, reconnaissance and wildlife surveys, aerial seeding and fish transplanting, and fire management.
This briefing is an introduction to you, the helicopter user, to provide you with the necessary information to safely plan and participate in Forest Service helicopter operations in Alaska.
When your job duties call for helicopter use, you will need to plan your flight carefully and complete a flight request form with the forest dispatcher or the forest helicopter operations specialist. The information on this request will include dates and specific times of day, passengers' names and weights, the type of cargo you're taking, the departure point and your destination. You will also include any special problems or considerations in this report. These might include logistics support, special equipment, hazardous materials, or possibly landing site difficulties. If you're planning a special use mission, such as a sling operation, you will need to involve the helicopter operations specialist early in the planning process. These operations require close supervision, and you will probably also be required to write a specific project plan and hazard analysis for your job. You should also have a plan for alternate projects that can be done if bad weather won't allow you to operate at your original work site. On the day of your flight, make sure that you have all your necessary gear. This will include maps and aerial photos of your work area, and these will help you to select landing and pickup sites. You will also need your work equipment and your own personal survival gear. It's a good idea to pack warm clothing and anything else you might need in case bad weather interferes with your pickup. You will be asked to give weather information by radio before your helicopter returns to pick you up. Remember that Region 10 policy requires a minimum of a 500-foot ceiling and a half-mile visibility. Maximum winds should not exceed 30 miles an hour. Be sure to be at the departure point prior to your scheduled flight time. The helicopter manager will try to schedule your flight as close as possible to your requested time. But remember that other work crews will probably be going out either right before or after you. And if you're late, they're late. The helicopter manager is in charge of all helicopter operations. The manager's job is to assist the pilot and make sure that all passengers conduct themselves safely around the helicopter. Before you fly, the helicopter manager will give you a hands-on safety briefing for the helicopter that you will be flying in. This briefing will include both the location and the operation of safety equipment, your personal protective equipment, and standard procedures that you will follow while working in and around helicopters. In Region 10, all passengers and crew members are required to wear personal protective equipment. These include a highly visible orange Nomex flight suit, Nomex gloves, a flight helmet, and a flotation survival vest. Rubber or leather boots at least 8 inches high are also required. In your safety briefing, you will learn how to wear and adjust this safety equipment. Your briefing will also include the proper approach and departure routes when moving around a helicopter. You should always approach the helicopter from the front, but only after instruction by the pilot or helicopter manager. There is no reason to feel rushed or to hurry when moving around a helicopter, and you should be careful when carrying your gear to and from the helicopter. Long items should be carried low and parallel to the ground. Loose clothing, such as hats, should be removed before your approach to keep them from being swept into the rotor. Never approach the helicopter from behind or from upslope. This will prevent accidentally walking into the main or tail rotor system. Tail rotors become very difficult to see in certain light situations and travel at speeds that make them virtually invisible. Heat from the engine exhaust jet can result in severe burns. After safely approaching the helicopter manager will assist you to safely store your gear. Become familiar with the operation of the passenger doors and latches, and also the handholds and footsteps. Be careful to step over the skids to keep from damaging the pop-out floats. These are used if an emergency water landing is necessary. Also, let the helicopter manager know in advance if you are transporting firearms and/or hazardous materials. These may have to be transported in special containers or be stowed in a special way.
Welcome back. Strong gales in the forecast out of the southeast here along the coast tomorrow. Seas 17 to 22 feet. Otherwise, south to east winds 20 to 25 knots over the inside waters. And the outlook for Thursday, still with the gale force winds, southerlies here for the coastline with pretty high seas, 25 to 30 feet. Clarence Strait, southeast 30 knots. Otherwise, small craft advisories are 25 knot winds all the way up into Lynn Canal. And then for Prince William Sound tomorrow, southeast coming down to 40 knots from the storms you'll start out with. And all these winds will be diminishing tomorrow, coming down from storm force in the case of the Barren Islands and Kamishak Bay from hurricane force tonight, again 65 to 70 knots. Tomorrow afternoon coming down to about 45 or less, 40 knots for Kodiak Island. Gales out for Cook Inlet. And then much lighter winds for Cook Inlet on Thursday, east to southeast 10 knots. Winds 25 knots there for Prince William Sound. Small craft advisories for the North Gulf Coast and the Barren Islands. 15 to 20 knot southerlies there across Kodiak Island up into Kamishak Bay. And Bristol Bay tomorrow, south 50 knots. Southwesterlies 40 to 45 knots here across the Alaska Peninsula with seas 15 feet in Bristol Bay to 23 feet there south of the peninsula. Then on Thursday, much lighter winds for Bristol Bay, southeast, barely a breeze, south to southeast, 25 knots there across the peninsula. Strongest winds will be up here toward Kodiak Island at about 30 knots. And for the Aleutians, north to northwest here, small craft advisories out in the west with 12 to 13 foot seas, west to southwest, For the remainder of the Aleutians, up to 20 to 30 knots across the Fox Islands. And for Thursday, 15 to 20 knot winds from the south-southwest here for the eastern Aleutians, turning more westerly at about 25 knots for the central Aleutians, northwest 30 out to the west. And for the southwest coast, south of Nunivak Island, storm warnings into the afternoon tomorrow, south 50 knots, and then 40 knot northeasterlies here, 30 to 40 knots for the northern Bering Sea to St. Lawrence Island, and those winds coming down to 20 knots for the Pribilofs out of the southwest. And for Thursday, south winds 20 knots here for the coast, southeast 25 for St. Lawrence Island, south 20 for the Pribilofs, and 15 knots for the northern Bering Sea. For the Arctic coast, northeasterlies 15 to 20 knots, taking a more easterly direction there toward Kaktovik and Demarcation Point. Gales here from Wales all the way up to Cape Beaufort, 35 to 40 knot northeasterlies. Brisk wind advisories here for the western Arctic coast. And moving ahead to Thursday, southeast 30 now from Wales up to Cape Thompson. Still looking at some good gales out of the east there from Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort, and small craft or brisk wind advisories for the western Arctic coast. Then it lightens up pretty good, 15 knots for the central coast and southeasterlies at 10 to 15 knots onto the east. For tonight, big storm, pretty fierce here, dropping down to 954 millibars at about 3 a.m. tomorrow morning. High wind warnings, 80 to 100 knot or mile per hour wind gusts here for Bristol Bay. And same thing for south central Alaska, high wind warning out, hurricane force winds in advance of the front. And then for tomorrow, that low lifts northward, taking the stronger winds with it up to the north, but still pretty windy all the way down across Bristol Bay. Strong winds in advance of the front, edging eastward across the Gulf of Alaska. And then for Thursday, that low weakens, pulls back to the west. Another system rolls northwards, making landfall somewhere along the North Gulf Coast during the day for gale force winds and rain into the Panhandle. Have a great evening.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.